My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The bookstore usually closed at 8, but I kept finding excuses to pass by on my evening runs, slowing down just enough to check if her lights were still on. Sometimes they were. Sometimes she was inside, bent over a stack of books, hair tied loosely, glasses halfway down her nose. Tonight, though, I went in. Back again, she said without looking up, flipping a receipt between her fingers. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. You make the best coffee in town. She gave me that small half-smile, the one where her lips curved but her eyes stayed serious. You don't drink coffee. You drink tea. I don't know why that got me. The fact that she remembered. Right, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Tea, then. I watched her move behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, her hands steady as she poured water. She had this way of being slow but efficient, like she never rushed anything, not words, not gestures. I found myself watching the way her fingers tapped against the mug as she waited for it to steep. We didn't talk much. We rarely did. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was, suspended, like a thread between us neither of us wanted to break. She slid the cup toward me without meeting my eyes. Late night? Couldn't sleep, I said. It wasn't a lie. She nodded like she understood, like she always understood, and leaned against the counter, arms folded. It's the rain, she said softly. Makes everything feel restless. Outside, the drizzle hit the windows in uneven rhythms. I noticed a strand of hair slipping from her bun, sticking to her cheek, and before I realized it, my fingers twitched, like I wanted to reach out. I didn't. Instead, I fiddled with the edge of the napkin, folding it over and over until it was a perfect square. She noticed. Her lips curved again. You always do that when you're nervous. I froze, halfway through another fold. Do I? She sipped her tea, not explaining. That's the thing about her. She never pushed. She let you sit with yourself until you said more than you planned to. I glanced at the clock. 9:17, too late to still be here, too early to make leaving seem deliberate. I cleared my throat. I should, but I didn't finish, because my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message lit up the screen, Dad, flight delayed again. Won't be back till Monday. I stared at it longer than I needed to. When I looked up, she was watching me, her expression unreadable. Everything okay? She asked, voice low. Yeah, I said, though it came up quieter than I meant. Her gaze lingered a moment before she nodded, like she was storing something away. She reached for another mug, then paused, fingers resting on the handle. You can stay a while, if you want, she said finally. I still have some shelves to restock. It sounded casual. It wasn't. I hesitated, thumb hovering over my phone, the unsent reply to my dad still open. I should have left. I should have said goodnight. But instead, I set the napkin down, smoothed it flat, and said, yeah. Okay. Somewhere above us, the old ceiling fan hummed softly. The rain slowed outside. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't think about sleep at all. My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. The rain had stopped, but neither of us mentioned it. She was kneeling by a low shelf, sliding books into neat stacks, and I was sitting cross-legged on the floor across from her, pretending to help. Mostly, I just watched her hands. She always handled books like they were alive, fingertips brushing their spines as though she knew their weight better than anyone else. Do you ever read the endings first? I asked, picking up a copy of something old and battered. Her head tilted slightly, a small frown forming. Never. Why not? Because endings only mean something if you've earned them. I smiled at that, though she didn't look up to see it. You sound like someone who's had to earn a lot. She paused mid-reach, her hand resting on the edge of the shelf. For a second, I thought I'd pushed too far. But then she exhaled softly and sat back against the wall. My husband, she said quietly, as if testing the words, used to say the same thing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I'd heard her mention him before, in passing, but never like this. You still talk to him? I asked, keeping my tone light, neutral. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp but not unkind. He travels a lot, she said. Sometimes it feels like we only talk in flight updates. I nodded, pretending to focus on the stack of books in front of me, though my chest felt tight. That was the first time I thought about the weight of what I was doing, or not doing, yet, sitting on this floor, letting my knee brush against hers when we both reached for the same paperback. She didn't pull away. Your dad mentioned you're staying at the house while he's gone, she said after a while. Yeah, I murmured, running a thumb along the book's worn cover. Feels weird, though. Like I don't fit there anymore. You've been away for years, she said. It takes time to settle back into old spaces. I nodded, but I didn't tell her the truth, that it wasn't the house I didn't fit into. It was everything else. This town. The people. The version of me they remembered. And then there was her. The silence stretched, soft but charged. Outside, car tires hissed against wet pavement. I wondered if she could hear how uneven my breathing had gotten. You should try this one, she said suddenly, sliding a book across the floor toward me. Her fingers brushed mine, barely. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. I looked up, and she was already looking at me. Neither of us smiled, but neither of us looked away, either. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She cleared her throat first, standing and dusting off her hands. I should lock up, she said. Right. But when I handed the book back, she didn't take it. Keep it, she said. And somehow, I knew she didn't mean the book at all. My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. I don't know when helping at the bookstore became a routine. 3 nights in a row, I found myself there after closing, stacking paperbacks, reorganizing shelves that didn't really need it. She didn't ask me to stay, and I didn't ask if I should. It just happened. Tonight, the place was quiet except for the faint hum of the old ceiling fan. She was perched on the counter, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. I was pretending to organize a stack of magazines but mostly just listening to the soft sound of her breathing. You've been around a lot lately, she said suddenly, without looking up. I froze halfway through flipping a page. Too much? She glanced at me, one eyebrow slightly raised, then shook her head. Just noticed. Something about the way she said it, careful, measured, made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask what she meant. I didn't. Instead, I said, guess I like the company. Her lips parted slightly, like she might say something, but before she could, the door swung open and the bell above it chimed. Hey, a voice called. I turned. It was Claire, one of her friends, mid-30s, chatty, the type who always notices everything she shouldn't. Oh, Claire said, eyes darting between us, lingering just a second too long. Didn't know you had company. I stepped back instinctively, creating space, pretending to focus on the magazines again. Elena slipped off the counter, voice smooth. Noah's just helping out. Claire smiled, but it was the kind of smile that meant something else entirely. Right. The silence after she left was different. Heavy, somehow. Elena busied herself with wiping the counter, even though it didn't need wiping. She talks, she said softly, like she was warning me. I figured, I murmured. She nodded once, then stopped moving, hand resting flat against the counter. We should, she didn't finish. Neither did I. The rest of the night, we stayed on opposite sides of the room, pretending to work. Pretending not to notice. When it was finally time to leave, we walked out together, locking the door behind us. The street was quiet, slick from yesterday's rain. She hesitated by her car. "You heading home?" "Yeah." I shoved my hands into my pockets. "Unless you need anything else." Her hand stilled on the car door handle. She didn't look at me, but I saw her jaw tighten slightly. "I should go," she said finally. I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Right." "Yeah." But neither of us moved. The silence stretched thin between us, until she finally turned, just enough that our shoulders nearly brushed. I felt the weight of it, the almost. Her breath caught, just faintly, and I thought, then headlights swept across us as another car passed, braking it. She stepped back. "Good night, Noah." "Good night." I stood there long after she drove away, the moment still humming like static under my skin. My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. It started raining again the next evening. Not the kind of rain that soaks you instantly, just a light mist that clung to skin and made the air smell faintly like wet asphalt and pine. We ended up walking anyway. She'd closed the bookstore early, said she needed air, and somehow I'd offered to go with her. Neither of us questioned it. The streets were quiet. Streetlights reflected pale halos on the slick pavement, and our footsteps sounded too loud in the stillness. She had her arms folded, hands tucked into her sleeves, like she was cold. I kept my hands shoved deep in my pockets, fighting the urge to close the space between us. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly. I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About?" I hesitated. "Everything." She gave me a small side glance but didn't push. That was the thing about her, she never pressed for more than you offered. We stopped at the park bench overlooking the river, its wooden slats still damp from the earlier rain. She brushed her palm across the seat, wiping away the moisture before sitting down. I sat next to her, close enough to feel the heat of her body but not enough for it to seem deliberate. For a while, we just listened to the river. Finally, she said, "Claire called me today." I stiffened. "About what?" "She noticed," she said simply. I turned to her, heart hammering. "Noticed what?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark water. "That you've been around." "A lot." I let out a quiet breath, leaning forward, elbows on my knees. "And what did you say?" "That you were helping," she said. "Nothing more." The silence after that felt sharp, like something fragile hanging between us. I wanted to leave it there. I should have left it there. But instead, the words slipped out before I could stop them. "I don't think I'm helping." Her head turned slowly toward me, brows knitting slightly. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, fingers curling against my knees. "I come by every night. I stay late. I look for reasons to. I don't know." "You don't know what?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "That I shouldn't." I couldn't look at her when I said it. My chest felt tight, my breath uneven. She didn't answer right away. When I finally glanced up, she was watching me, not shocked, not angry, just still. Her hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that my own hand almost brushed against it. Almost. The rain softened, pattering lightly against the hood of my jacket. She exhaled slowly, eyes lowering. "Noah," the way she said my name, quiet, careful, made it worse somehow. I turned toward her, searching for something in her expression, and for one suspended heartbeat, I thought she might close the distance between us. Then she looked away. Her fingers curled slightly against the bench. "We shouldn't," she whispered. I nodded, throat dry. "I know." Neither of us moved. The question sat there, heavy, unspoken, then why are we still here? My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV, I didn't see her for 3 days. Not at the bookstore. Not passing by on my runs. Not anywhere. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe she was busy, maybe the weather kept her in, maybe I was imagining the distance. But by the 4th night, when I stopped by after closing and saw the darkened windows, I knew it wasn't chance. She was avoiding me. I stood across the street, staring at the handwritten sign taped inside the door, closed until Thursday. It wasn't Thursday. I almost texted her. I almost called. I didn't. The next time I saw her, it was in the grocery store. She was standing by the produce section, scrolling through her phone, basket hooked over one arm. When she looked up and saw me, her expression flickered, just for a second, like a light bulb caught between on and off. "Elena," I said softly. "Noah." Her voice was even, careful. "You've been busy," I said, keeping my tone light, pretending like I didn't already know the answer. "Yeah," she said, adjusting the basket strap on her shoulder. "Just needed some time." I nodded, waiting for her to say more, but she didn't. A silence opened between us, tight and awkward, nothing like before. Then, almost casually, she said, "My husband's back." It shouldn't have felt like a punch, but it did. "Oh." She studied me for a second, searching for something in my face, then gave a small, polite smile, the kind she used on strangers, and walked past me without looking back. I stood there holding a bag of apples I didn't remember picking up, feeling stupid for thinking things were the same. I didn't go to the bookstore after that. 2 weeks later, I heard from my dad that Elena and her husband were working on things. The words hit harder than I expected. I spent the next few days drifting through the house, opening and closing my phone, typing out messages I never sent. "How are you? Do you want to talk? I miss," delete. 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 I walked past the bookstore once, just to see. The lights were on, the door propped open, music playing faintly inside. I almost stepped in. I didn't. From the sidewalk, I saw her through the glass, laughing at something a customer said, her head tilted back, a gesture I used to think was just for me. I stood there until someone walked by and gave me a strange look, like I was intruding on something private. That night, I stared at my phone again, thumb hovering over her name, drafting one last message. I keep thinking about that night. I didn't send it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. It was late when I finally saw her again. Not at the bookstore, not on the street, but at the house. I'd come downstairs for water, barefoot, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake my dad, but when I reached the kitchen, the light was already on. She was there. Standing at the counter, hair loose around her shoulders, holding a glass she hadn't yet taken a sip from. For a moment, neither of us moved. "I didn't know you were still up," I said, voice low. She set the glass down carefully, fingers lingering on the rim. "Couldn't sleep." I nodded, leaning against the doorway. The silence stretched, carrying everything we hadn't said in weeks. "I thought you were avoiding me," I said finally. Her gaze flicked up, sharp and soft all at once. "I was." I swallowed, shifting my weight. "Because of him?" She didn't answer immediately. Just traced the edge of the glass with her fingertip, like she was buying time. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "With him?" "With everything." I nodded slowly, though something inside me tightened. "And is it working?" That made her look at me. Really look. Her eyes were tired. Not sad, not angry, just tired, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. "No," she whispered. The sound of the fridge humming filled the silence that followed. I took a step closer, then stopped halfway, hands shoved deep in my pockets. "You don't have to do this alone," I said, softer than I intended. Her breath hitched, barely audible. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "I know," I said. But I didn't step back. For a second, it felt like we were suspended there, the kitchen, the quiet, the weight of unspoken things pressing down on us. Her hand drifted toward the counter, fingertips brushing the edge, like she needed to ground herself. "Noah," I waited. But instead of pulling away, she let out a shaky breath, and for the first time, she met me fully, no guarded expressions, no polite deflections. "I think about that night," she said finally. "At the bookstore. The bench. All of it." Something cracked open in my chest. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint crease between her brows, the rise and fall of her breathing. "Me too," I said. The air shifted then, heavy but quiet, like we were standing on the edge of something neither of us was brave enough to name. Her hand tightened around the glass, knuckles pale. "I can't," she whispered. "I know." For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing the same thin air, saying nothing else. Then, slowly, she set the glass down and gave the smallest nod, like an acknowledgement, like a truce. "Okay," she said softly. And somehow, that one word carried everything we couldn't. My husband was out of town, and his son stayed in my bed, male POV. 6 months later, the bookstore smells the same. Paper and cedar shelves. Faint lemon polish. And always, that soft trace of her perfume I could never name. I come in earlier now, sometimes before opening, and she doesn't ask why. She just leaves the key under the mat, trusts me to flip the lights on and brew the tea. I don't think we ever talked about when this became routine. It just happened. The first time I made it for her, I messed up, used black coffee instead of Earl Grey. She didn't correct me. She drank half the cup, set it down, and said, "Next time, tea." That was months ago. I still make it right now. Things are quieter. The pauses aren't as sharp as they used to be. We still don't talk about that night in the kitchen, or the bookstore, or the bench by the river. But somehow, everything changed after it. I pass the bench every morning on my run. 8:47 a.m. Like clockwork. Sometimes I sit for a minute, drinking from the thermos she got me, watching the river move. Once, she came too, walking her dog. She didn't sit, just stood there looking at the water. I offered the thermos without thinking, and she took it without asking what was inside. Earl Grey. Of course. She smiled, barely, and handed it back without a word. But we both knew that moment mattered more than anything we could have said. Her husband moved out 2 months ago. Quietly. No fights, no slammed doors. Just absence. I never asked what happened. She never offered. All I know is, one morning she showed up at the store looking lighter somehow, like she'd set something down she'd been carrying for years. I wanted to ask her if she was okay, but instead, I just handed her tea and said, "It's stronger today." She smiled at that one. Not polite this time. Real. We're not together. Not officially. Not in the way people expect when they ask questions with raised eyebrows and half smiles. But I'm at the bookstore most nights, helping her close, arguing about where the Fitzgerald section should be, restocking the same damn shelf 3 times because she can't make up her mind. Sometimes, we walk to the river afterward. Sit on that same bench, knees almost touching, saying almost nothing. It feels enough. Maybe more than enough. Last night, she handed me a cup without looking at me. "Tea," she said. I took it, fingers brushing hers. "Thought you'd switched back to coffee," I murmured. She shook her head, lips curling slightly. "Not anymore." I smiled into the steam, quiet and certain in a way I hadn't been for years. I don't know if this is love. But I know it's ours. And that's enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?